Order, please rise for Mayor Michael Fougere.
Please be seated, everyone. Good evening and welcome to the June 26th meeting of City Council. If I could have a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll move the agenda at the call of the mayor.
Councilor Bryce, a seconder, please. Councilor Bresciani. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The minutes for the meeting on May 29th. Motion to adopt those.
I move that the minutes be adopted.
Councilor Hawkins, a seconder, please. Councilor Young. Any errors, omissions, discussions on the minutes? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll get into our delegations, communications, and public notices. The first delegation on the City Square Plaza Welcome Services Pavilion is Lavella Jones. Ms. Jones, if you can identify yourself for the record, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions from council after.
Good evening. I'm Lavella Jones, Manager of Operations for the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District. Good evening, Mayor Fougere and City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you in support of our City Square Plaza Welcome Services Pavilion. On behalf of the RDBID Board of Directors, I'm here to support the recommendation before you today. When City Square Plaza was designed, it included locations for two pavilions located at the east and west sides of the plaza. The East Pavilion was intended for food services, and the West was to be a visitor services pavilion. Underground infrastructure, including water lines, sewer, electrical, and grade beams, were put into place during the plaza construction. However, due to budget constraints, pavilions were never built. Currently, you see wood decking in the pavilion locations that are used to protect the grade beam. In 2012, Downtown Deferred Revenue Account was established. The funds in this account are made up of development charges from the construction of Mosaic Tower and Agriculture Place, along with surface parking over dedication fees in office area zones outside the city center. These funds are to be used specifically for downtown improvement projects and programming of downtown events. Regina Downtown is a strong supporter of City Square. Since 2011, RDBID has offered a number of programs that support positive activation of the park, plaza, and FW Hill Mall. Participation numbers of our programming have steadily increased. One example is Cinema Under the Stars, which went from 4,000 people attending 5 outdoor movies to 9,000 people attending this evening event. Other programs include Summer Concert Series, Salsa on the Plaza, Yoga, Victoria Park Skating Rink, and Exploration Days. In 2016, we had over 29,000 participants in our events and programs as indicated in Appendix A. Additionally, we provide visitor services such as brochure distribution, greeting and answering questions for visitors, and promoting other Regina businesses and events. Since 2011, we have operated our visitor services through our mobile kiosk and saw over 900 interactions in 2016. In order to continue to grow and enhance these services, we would like to finally complete the development of the planned Visitor Services Pavilion. With the pavilion's construction, we have a permanent professional location to provide support to visitors and residents who come to downtown. Please refer to Appendix B for the interior design of the pavilion. You will remember that you recently approved the construction of our expansion of Victoria Park Maintenance Building. That maintenance building will be used to support our larger capital assets, such as a utility vehicle, power washer, tables, chairs, and the like. Upon construction of the pavilion, along with the construction of the maintenance building, we will remove the 2 temporary storage facilities we have in City Square, the Peterson trailer located on the west side of Plaza, and the pup storage unit located in the maintenance area. Please refer to Appendix C. Once constructed, RDBID intends to fully staff the pavilion from Victoria Day through Labor Day, 6 days a week. Additionally, we would be open on key dates during the fall and winter for festivals, farmers market, and other events. The plans before you today are a result of the collaboration between RDBID and the community services staff, in particular Janine Deredich. Together, we have identified a suitable design that meets RDBID operational needs and allows us to grow our visitor services program.
Ms. Jones, you have 1 minute to go.
The estimated cost of this project is $300,000. We request an allocation from the Deferred Downtown Revenue Fund for $150,000. RDBID will be responsible for securing the remaining balance through capital reserve, grants, sponsorships, and/or donations. With your approval, we hope to have the Welcome Services Pavilion constructed and in operation for 2018. We look forward to continuing the partnership we have with the City of Regina in ensuring City Square, Victoria Park, and FW Hill Mall are vibrant, exciting, and safe places for the community to gather. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Other questions of the delegation? No, you made yourself perfectly clear. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
You can return to the gallery. Just with respect to the next two reports, there was public notice given to this, but there was also inadvertently added a public hearing notice, which means we have the clerk ask anyone in the audience who would like to speak to the issue, which is usually doesn't happen, but that was happened in this case. So, Mr. Clerk, if you want to proceed.
Thank you, Your Worship. As the Mayor indicated, this public notice is required under the Cities Act. The Mayor has explained that there was an inadvertent error in the publication of the advertisements. So in fairness to members of the public, if anyone wishes to address City Council on this particular matter or the subsequent matter with respect to a community gardens, I would ask that you indicate so at that time. There appears to be no one, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So we'll move on to CR 17-62, which is the City Square Plaza Welcome Service Pavilion. Councilor Flagel.
Rise in support of this in allowing the City Square to go ahead with this. As we talked about, this has been, if I can get a second.
Seconder, please. Seconder, please.
That the committee, there's about, we got 6 recommendations, and they're all basically related, and I'll just go to the meat of the one, and it's the City Council authorizes Executive Director of City Services to negotiate and approve the terms of a donation agreement for 50% of construction costs up to $150,000 from the Downtown Deferred Revenue Account. And that the City Council here tonight also authorized the Executive Director of City Services to negotiate and approve the terms of donation and recognition agreement between the city and any donor donating over $100,000 as further described in this report. And that City Council approved the assignment of naming rights for the pavilion on terms to the negotiated and approved by the Executive Director of City Services to any donor providing greater than $100,000. So basically what they're doing is they're trying to put up a second pavilion. There's a not so nice looking building there right now on 8-inch skids, and it doesn't look very nice. And I don't know if the piano was ever removed from there too, but hopefully it's gone, so maybe it'll be another, somebody else may donate one there. There used to be one sitting there, and it just deterred from the whole thing again. So we move recommendation on this, and that's great. It's going to be a nice sight to see.
Thank you, Councilor Flagel. Are there other discussion points on the report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Finance Administration Report 63, the Grow Regina Community Gardens Incorporated lease of land for community gardens.
Your Worship, I rise to declare a conflict of interest. I'm a member of the Lakeview Community Association, and Grow Regina has an informal arrangement with the Lakeview Community Association.
Thank you, Councilor Hawkins. Councilor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am bringing forward 1763 from Finance and Admin and asking for concurrence. In 2006, the community garden policy was adopted by the city, which gives land for gardens. And what's coming forward is Grow Regina on Queen Street, which is the last of several city gardens that have come forward for lease renewal in the last year. And the reason it has to come to council is that it's city land and it's not being offered for public offering, and it is also less than the market value and requires council approval. So leasing of land for community gardens is a community service that's provided by the City of Regina. So I recommend approval of this 10-year lease and as defined in the report.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconder for the report, please. Councillor Bryce, debate, discussion on the issue. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. We'll wait for Councillor Hawkins to come back in. So our next report is on the Buffalo Pond Water Treatment Corporation acceleration of electrical upgrade and capital projects. We have a delegation that is here to answer questions only, and that is Chuck McDonald and Dale Schofer. I know there are questions, so you possibly just should come forward and be prepared to answer some questions on this. And if you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent.
Good day. My name is Chuck McDonald, and this is Dale Schofer. We're on the board of Buffalo Pound Water.
Are there questions of the delegation? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. Gentlemen, good evening. Thanks for being here. So let's just talk this through a little bit. So we're talking about accelerating an electrical upgrade to the water treatment plant. Is that correct?
That indeed is correct.
Let's start at the very basic level. Why is the water treatment plant responsible for the upgrade? Why isn't SAS Power thrilled to just provide better service or something?
Through your worship, probably 2 years ago, we contacted SAS Power. They have expressed the point that they're responsible to bring electricity to our gates, and thereafter it is our responsibility. They did entertain options around that, but it was prohibitively expensive.
Are you considered a commercial entity, and is that part and parcel how they handle other commercial entities?
Through your worship, as far as I know, that is correct.
Thanks very much. I know that we are a partner with the City of Moose Jaw in this venture. Have they been approached about this as well? And if so, could you tell me where that sits now?
Certainly. Through your worship, Moose Jaw City Council is meeting tonight as well. It has gone through their executive committee last week, and it was passed by a vote of 7-0.
Thanks for that. So we're sitting at the same place. That's good. So could you just, if you don't mind, just describe a little bit about what this upgrade is in a functional fashion? What will happen here?
Okay. Through your worship, our mandate is to provide a reliable source of safe and economical water. That would actually be under pressure with our electrical problems. We've done a risk registry, and we've identified 40 risks, and of those 40 risks, electrical is 6 of the top 10. Over the past 6 years, we've had 7 electrical failures, 6 of which have amounted to reduction in production for the cities.
So hence why the word acceleration is here, because your plan was actually not to do this for a little while?
Through your honor, through your worship, yes, financing terms will be more favorable if we do it now, and it mitigates risk. It's a substantial concern to us.
So long-term financially, what will the impact of this this have on, say, the citizens of Moose Jaw or the citizens of Regina?
Through your worship, the expectation is water rates will not rise.
Because of this development?
Because of this development.
Okay, good. I'm good. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other questions of the delegation while they're still here? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one question. You mentioned that this was 6 of the top 10 risks to the water supply. Are the other 4 risks being managed? Do you have any particular concerns with respect to those risks that you wish to draw to our attention?
Through Your Worship, specifically, I don't know what all of the risks are, but they would pertain to the age of the infrastructure, and we are looking in the future about having some renewal there. It's nuts and bolts for us, Councillor. Usually, it's we're dealing with processes and machinery that are 50 to 60 years old.
In the last several years, there's been concern about the amount of algae and plant growth in the water. Is that something that you feel could be managed?
Through Your Worship, typically algae problems in Buffalo Pound relate to high water levels where Moose Jaw River will back up into our lake. I don't think that there is a technology that would prevent that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Are there other questions? Councillor Massanelli.
I noted in our area, through Your Worship, I noted in our area one of the high costs of water have to do with the electrical pumping of our water. Has there been any look into green supply of electricity, maybe alternative supplies, such as biofuel or solar, wind, anything like that become applicable in this?
Thank you. Through Your Worship, the processes that we employ, we pull water, we process water, we push water. We're a big user. I believe we're in the top 40 in Saskatchewan in terms of electrical use, and alternative sources of energy would probably, we could maybe look at some ancillary processes, but the largest part of what we need to do requires good old electricity coming down the line.
Mm-hmm. Is this something you're looking towards for the future? Are there thoughts of this? This is going forward for 40 or 50 years.
Through Your Worship, nothing that I'm aware of.
Okay. Has there ever been any studies done into it?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massanelli. Other questions? Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question in regards to funding. Have you done any exploration into federal funding to help out with this at all?
Thank you for that question. Through Your Worship, we had just recently made application through the CWWF, the Canadian Water and Wastewater Fund, but we were sadly not selected to receive funding this tranche. As soon as the next application comes open, we will be applying.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. No other questions? You can return to the gallery. Thank you very much for answering questions. Now we'll look at Executive Committee Report, Buffalo Pound Water Treatment Corporation Acceleration of Electrical Upgrade Capital Project. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. If I could have a second, I'll speak to this.
Seconder. Councillor Murray.
Thank you. So as you heard from the delegation one, there was always been a plan to improve the electrical structures that involve our water treatment plant, and we are partners with the City of Moose Jaw. So I have a question to the administration. I'll begin with the idea of borrowing capital. So it looks like from the report that we are looking at borrowing up to $45 million. One, is that all from the City of Regina? And two, if not, what's the proportionate share between Moose Jaw and Regina, please?
Mr. Ray.
Your Worship, members of the City Council, so the total project is $45 million, as mentioned. The ratio of water, the proportionate share of the project is related to the ratio of water usage. And also to ownership. We're 74% owners. Moose Jaw is 26% owners. So I believe our share is $33 million, and the balance would be from the City of Moose Jaw. That's not investment. That's just guaranteeing the debt. So there'll be no capital injection on our part. The Buffalo Pound plant, through the sale of water, will earn a return and will pay off the loan. So it really just shows up on our debt limit, but we wouldn't be actually making the payments. We just have to pay for our water.
Good, thanks very much. So I'll just pick up on the notion of debt limit. Could you just comment about that, where we're at right now and the effect this would have, please? You've already mentioned that there's a stream to pay this off, but if you don't mind just making that clear.
Mr. Ray?
So our debt limit at the City of Regina is $450 million. But after this transaction is complete, we should be at right around $350 million, so we would have another $100 million in capacity in our debt limit.
And based on what I heard from the delegation and what we were told when we discussed this, it seems the City of Moose Jaw, although meeting at the same time, is on the same path as us. Without making assumptions, just if they happen to reverse their plan, what does our agreement, if we so choose, how would that be affected, if you don't mind?
Mr. Ray?
Thank you, Your Worship, members of the City Council. So I would start off by saying that we are doing everything possible to work cooperatively and collaboratively with our partner, and have had great success in doing that. If for some odd reason that it wasn't approved by either one of the partners, then that would create us back, the board, in a decision-making mode on how to look at financing the project. The options would be to defer the project until more capital was available on hand. There's also mechanisms within the agreement where there can be, under certain circumstances, the majority partner could proceed with the project, but it would create a great deal of challenging dynamics to manage. But that there is a bit of fail-safe there as it relates to the majority partner in terms of advancing projects as well as the construct of the board of directors. So, but I would close by saying I'm very confident that we will obtain a collaborative result with our good friends in Moose Jaw.
Thanks, and I want to agree with that. We've had this plant joint operation since about 1958, and we really haven't had any problems. However, I identified the question simply so that you know that was part of an agreement that we all agreed to at some point in time. There are ways to handle this. One, we need this. Two, the reason that there's before us an acceleration is because we've had some problems in the last recent history. And so we have assurance that the water rates will not be affected in our two communities because of this upgrade, and I put forward that we should be agreeing to this. Please, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Is there anyone else who wants to discuss the report? I just one question for the administration that relates to the our application, or the application from Buffalo Pound to the province and federal government through the CWWF, the Water Wastewater Fund. That was rejected because of the timing of the application, not because of how important this is. Is that correct?
Your Worship, members of council, yes. The city of, we got some mixed messages from the province on our ability to apply. By the time Buffalo Pound submitted their application, the City of Regina had used up all its entitlement. We have three other projects in the water, wastewater world that are underway. And so there wasn't, in the first tranche, additional funds available to be drawn upon by Buffalo Pound. So there was the option of deferring the project and applying again for this same project down the road. Having said that, the Buffalo Pound plant, the board, and certainly the two administrations of the partners see need for a more substantive project that would either see the refurbishment and or replacement of the plant with or without, depending on more work to come from the board of directors, with or without a increase in capacity. And that would be a major project, and we would see that being the target of a future application to the Clean Water Wastewater Fund. So by allocating the next one to the big project, the last one we used up our allotment from the City of Regina perspective. That left us in a position where it's our view that it makes most sense to proceed. And certainly the corporation, with just some loan guarantee, not cash, can proceed on their own accord.
Thank you, Mr. Ray, for that. Other comments on the report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Next report is, actually, we were to have a delegation, Mr. Kozan. He's not able to be here. This is for the proposed medical clinic on College Avenue. Can I have a motion to receive and file its communication, please? Councilor O'Donnell, the seconder, please. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now the main report, and this is a contract zone application for proposed medical clinic at 1636 College Avenue. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thank you. Can I have a second? I'll speak to this, please.
Councilor Young.
Thanks. So there's a little bit of a story here. This is a very, very large house, former house, I guess, on College Avenue, and it kind of sits by itself. Beside it is a large parking lot. Beside it is a apartment building. And so this large house kind of sits by itself. It was sitting on the market for a couple of years. No one bid on it. A young fellow, Dr. Dan Kozan, came back to Regina after leaving. He is a plastic surgeon and took a risk and bought this house. So he owns it. So as a house, it would seem to be very difficult for someone to bring it back to life. So he proposes to put a medical clinic in here. He is a plastic surgeon. His view is that he would be there one day of the week and have upwards of, at the most, 25 patients come in and use the facility that would be renovated. He proposes further to have as many as 3 other doctors as part of his practice who would then separately come in on that same kind of a schedule. One day of the week, different from his, upwards of 20 or 25 patients, and so on. So give or take 4 days of the week would have, I'll call it, a minimal number of people. The recommendation from the administration was to deny, whereas Planning Commission unanimously, by the way, looked at this differently. We thought that this, one, was a way to resurrect this building and keep it safe and alive. 2, it was consistent with another plastic surgeon, although it's down the street and a little farther to the west, but who runs a practice out of a similar situation. And this fellow wanted to copy it. 2, it's close to the general hospital. So he asked not only for a contract zone, but also to amend the official community plan so that it would fit into the hospital zone that is around the general hospital. And we agreed with all of this. There is going to be renovations done to the building, some change. There will be parking, not only on the property, in front of the property, beside the property, and lots across the street, because there are many other changes that have occurred there on the Anglican Archdiocese lands and senior homes. We really thought this was wonderful, and we had a very engaging discussion at planning, and unanimously put this before you and for acceptance, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Councilor Flagel.
Thank you. A couple of other things that were brought up, and this was a good idea because you're right, it is resurrecting an old house, but there was a bit of a comparison done in planning from a Dudney Avenue location that was going to be more parking, that has more, or had a more of a challenging parking issue, was a lot busier, and everything was okay with this. This is more about the zoning, but this was something that we talked about also about the medical corridor for the area, and which never has really taken off on the Broad Street. It has a bit, but it's not been taken off in that whole corridor along 14th Avenue, Broad Street, and the whole area around the General Hospital as being a medical corridor. This would be another added bonus. And yeah, you're right, Councilor O'Donnell, there is another another plastic surgeon down the street, and there's probably a few other places in there too along 14th Avenue. But the biggest thing that we looked at was this guy was coming on here straight, right up front, told us exactly everything, was going to work with administration. I'm sure his parents in the audience are proud of him because he's now come back to Regina, which is a huge asset to Regina and Saskatchewan. So we felt that the biggest thing was that he was going to add to the building and still put, I think, 6 parking spaces on the property, because there's an old garage that he can knock down and just get rid of, and he'll put nice parking spaces at the back alley where they're supposed to be, and then there's all kinds of street parking as well. So along with that, planning did recommend, and we changed it. We changed what administration was looking at, but it was a good idea. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor Flagel. Other speakers to Councilor Stevens.
Thank you. I'm supporting the Planning Commission's recommendation here. I was wondering if administration could provide a bit of an overview as to what the Heritage Community Association, as well as residents in that area, had to say about the proposal.
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, I'll start, and then I might defer to Mr. Searle. But the Heritage Community Association did support the application. They did recognize that it didn't meet Section B of the OCP with respect to the two neighborhood plans, but they did feel that based on the intent of the community plan and the area, that they were supportive of seeing this use come forward. And then as far as the other comments, I believe there was some concerns from neighbors with respect specifically to parking, and for one neighbor that had some concerns with respect to the Regina Transition House. But they did indicate that as long as the clinic is for plastic surgeons and their consultations, they weren't opposed, as it should limit the amount of people coming to and from the house. I'd ask Mr. Searle if he has anything else to add.
Mr. Searle?
No, Your Worship, Ms. Howrlock is covered.
I recall reading in there was a resident who had raised a concern about sidewalk snow clearance. Can you tell me how that might change now with the proposed contract zoning amendment?
Ms. Howrlock?
Through you, Your Worship, I might ask Mr. Searle to go into the specifics about that concern.
Mr. Searle?
Your Worship, on an Appendix B2 of the report specifies that the clean property bylaw requires the owner of a commercial building to clear any hazardous condition created by snow or ice within 48 hours of accumulation. So that would need to be adhered to.
Thank you. Just a final comment. I read in the report that RQHR had raised concerns about parking and pedestrian safety. All I want to say about that is there's a degree of irony in that comment, considering the responsibility that the General Hospital has and not providing adequate parking for patients, visitors, and residents. So I'm standing in support of this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Other speakers? Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. I noticed on the plans there was a ramp for accessibility, but I noticed on the drawings it doesn't really show that. So is there a ramp so that it is accessible, this building?
Ms. Howrlock?
Through your worship, I believe that as per the building code, they would have to have accessibility standards met with the renovations that they would have to undertake for the building.
Okay, thank you. I thought so. And I think it's a dermatologist down the street, not a plastic surgeon, just to clarify that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Other speakers to the report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And we'll move on to, we have a new late delegation here. Mr. Brad Pickard will be here just for questions only. So we are looking at the discretionary use application for a fast food outlet on 13th Avenue. Is there a desire to speak to the delegation on this? They're here only to answer questions, not to make a presentation. Okay, that's good. Okay, Mr. Pickard, you're off the hook. We'll move on to the report itself, and this is a Planning Commission report for a discretionary use application for a fast food outlet at 3008 13th Avenue. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. If I could have a seconder, I'll speak to this.
Seconder, please. Okay. Councillor Stevens.
So Gales Florist has existed in this building for a long time, but on the one side it has been either vacant or not used very much, and so the proposal before you is for a coffee shop, excuse me, to be there. It's the kind of coffee shop where they will roast the beans, and speaking to that, they have all of the latest technology, or will have, to make sure that the smell doesn't hurt people around them. And so you can walk in, get your coffee, and walk out. It's not one of those sit-down places. You can grab something. And so we saw this as being benefit to an existing building. It'll get some renovation, but also to the neighborhood. And I point out, and I must admit, this was new to me. I have learned something, and I enjoy this. But if you went down to the appendix, you would see that there are people in the community who feel that having coffee is an essential service. So on that point alone, I'm asking you, please, agree. Thank you.
Don't make them grumpy by saying no. Other speakers to the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I would like to have a motion to receive and file the communication by Mr. Pickard, please. That's CP 17-13. Have a motion for that, please. Councillor Hawkins, a seconder, please. Okay. Councillor Murray, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we'll move on to our next report. This is a Community Protective Services, a 2017-18 Community Services Fees and Charges. Councillor Flagel.
Thank you. I rise in support of CR 17-66, and it is the new fee schedule for 2017 and 18.
Have a seconder for that, please. Councillor Brasciani.
Thank you. And that the fees charged as outlined in Appendix A, Schedule A through H be approved, and that the city solicitor be instructed to prepare an amendment to Community Services Fees Bylaws 2011 to update the fees and charges as outlined in Appendix A on this report. We recommend concurrence.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Speakers? Councillor Bryce?
Thank you very much. I just have a question on that first page. It talks about a dog swim. Can you tell us what a dog swim is all about?
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, this year we piloted a dog swim, and it was very popular and well received. The addition of a fee for a dog swim in the upcoming years to cost recover both the fees from the Humane Society and our administration for monitoring and overseeing the dog swim.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. When this report came out, I had one guy phone me, and he wanted to know cost recovery on...
Councillor Flagel, just a moment. Just you'll be closing debate.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that anybody else wants to speak first. Okay, and I have a question.
Okay, I'll sit.
Okay. I'll go after you.
I have a question for administration regarding accessibility and affordability. What kind of consideration goes into making these decisions if there's an increase in the cost of these civic services to residents' ability to pay? And if I did not have the means to purchase a pass or access these services, are there support structures in place?
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, so I'll start, and then I'm going to ask Mr. May to conclude. So the fees, when we look at fees, we look at inflationary increases. So we use the municipal price index plus the consumer price index to get a feel for where those are being projected to be at a year from now or 2 years from now. We also have a look at the market. So an example would be when we look at fitness centers, those fees we would compare and have a look at other comparable fees in the private sector or other group clubs. I'll maybe ask Mr. May to talk about the help that people can get. We do have some programs for that.
Mr. May.
Through you, Your Worship. The City of Regina also offers a program called Affordable Fund. It's for those people who meet an income test, who have an economic barrier to participating. Then the City of Regina waives 50% of the fee.
Thank you. A final comment or question here for Mr. Onright. You had mentioned the market. Would that also include comparable size cities and how much they charge for civic services?
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, can I get that repeated again, please?
You mentioned how it compares in the market. How does how does the cost of these passes compare to, say, Saskatoon and other cities?
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, I'll ask Mr. May to comment on where the data is gathered from.
We
Mr.
do,
May.
through your worship, we do take a look at other cities of our size. In, for instance, Saskatoon, their primetime ice rental rate is $255 per hour. Ours is $246 per hour. Their adult single admission to one of their leisure centers is $9.80, and ours is $6.67 plus GST, which works out to $7 all told.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Stevens. Other questions? I do have one, and it relates to this point that Councilor Stevens just raised. It relates to the cost recovery strategy that's used on market-based pricing, if you will, is our traditional way to do it. This time it's just inflation. Is this because of a timing issue related to the recreation facilities report, or is there something else that's driving that change? Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, no, it is primarily linked to when the recreation master plan is going to come forth for consideration by council. Once that comes to council, we will do a review of the fees and charges again to make sure they're in line.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much. Councilor Flanagan to close debate.
Thank you. You good? Okay, thanks. Yeah, cost recovery was a question that was brought up. So the hockey rinks, not without the cooperators, what percentage are fees paying for those rinks, and what percentage is the city topping it up?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, I'll ask Mr. May to comment.
Mr. May?
Through your worship, the current, as of 2016, our current cost recovery rate for indoor ice is about 63%.
Okay.
So we are subsidizing the indoor ice program by about 37%.
Okay. Because the cooperators is on EVRAS in their purview, is the taxpayers funding that as well to the same ratio, or is that a different ratio, the cooperator rinks, the 6 of them?
Mr. May?
Through you, your worship, the City of Regina purchases a block of ice time from Evraz Place for time at the cooperators. We currently purchase 5,600 hours per year. They charge us the going market rate that they charge for that, and then we turn around and sell it to our customers. Some of our customers are youth sports, and we subsidize youth sports to the tune of about 65%. So we don't recover 100% of what we purchase from Evraz Place.
Okay. And then one more, just for people to know, the Fieldhouse Lawson. What's the recovery for the City of Regina through fees, and what's the taxpayer paying on that?
Mr. May?
Currently, we recover approximately 50% of our direct costs for running the Lawson and the Fieldhouse through fees.
Perfect. Thank you. That's what I want to know. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Flanagan. Other discussion? You've closed debate. All those in favor on the report? Those opposed? That's carried. Move on to Executive Committee Long-Term Disability Plan. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thank you. Long-term disability plan, if I could have a second.
Second, please, for that. Councilor Murray.
Thank you. So I'm going to step back in time just a little bit. First, I'm going to mention who the employers are that are involved in what we're going to talk about. That is the City of Regina, the Regina-Capel Regional Health Authority, the Regina Board of Education, their non-teaching staff, the Regina Public Library, the Buffalo Pound Water Administration Board, and kind of new Mobius Benefit Administrators, Inc., who are in fact the administrators of this plan. So what happened was, you will recall, one of the very big issues that was before us was our pension plan, and we came to resolve it was those same employers, and I think everybody is very happy with how that turned out. What's happened now is that we've had a look at the long-term disability plan. I think this speaks greatly toward our employees, how they're treated, and as well as for the other employers. After review, and I'm not going to mention them all, but I'm going to just mention a couple. Here's what was found. One, that they could reduce the member and employer contributions by 50%, that they could increase the benefit amount from 65% to 75% of earnings. And they get index COLA up to the remaining 50% change in CPI. They could increase the own occupation period from 12 months to 24 months. And there's a few others. My point about this is that there's been extra money about $30 million here, if I remember the number correctly. Am I right, 30 million? Thank you. And so they were able to look back and say, well, so what can we do? Well, what we can do is reduce the amount of money that you as an employee are paying into this plan, and we can reduce as an employer how much we're putting into the plan. But by the way, we can increase your benefits. I think this speaks volumes to how we treat our staff, how the other employers are also going to treat their staff. This is, I hate this phrase. I hate this win-win stuff.
Don't use it then. Don't use it.
I know, but it seems to be the only time that I've ever in the last 11 years actually felt that that's really the way it goes. Okay, everybody wins on this one. And this is a signal to, I think, to our community, that there's a cost saving involved, but to our employees that we value you. Please accept.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers to the report? I have a question, and it relates to the reverse. Now, we do understand that there's an agreement of how surplus benefits or income will be distributed. We just heard this now, and there's a really good report. Explain, if you can, to Council and to those watching tonight, what happens when the amount of money flowing in from both the employer and employee does not meet coverage? What happens on that? So, Mr. Deanna, do you want that, or Mr. Ray? Mr. Deanna?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. So the plan, the actuaries would look at the plan, we'd evaluate experience versus liabilities. Once the reserve looks like it's being drawn down, if experience rises, then what would need to happen at a certain date would, A, the ad hoc COLA may have to be removed, and or premiums would have to be increased on both sides, the employer and the employee. And this is typical of all benefit plans.
One last question. Would the benefits also change?
Through you, Your Worship, they may.
Okay. That's good. This is a targeted plan, which is both benefits and input costs, right?
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Deanna. That's good. I'll call the question on this report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll move on to two bylaws. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. The first bylaw, 2017-25, is the Community Services Fees Amendment Bylaw for 2017. The second one is 2017-28, the Regina Civic Employees Long-Term Disability Plan Amendment Bylaw 2017. I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that bylaws 2017, 25, and 28 be introduced and read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Fundura, that bylaws 2017, 25, and 28 be read a second time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Bryce, that Council hereby consents to bylaws 2017, 25, and 28 going to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
And finally, I move, seconded by Councillor Murray, that bylaws 2017, 25, and 28 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Administration reports. Before we move the report, I'd like to ask the City Manager for some background comments on CM 17-10, which is the PTIF and CWWF contribution agreements. Mr. Holden.
Your Worship and members of City Council, you'll recall back in September of 2016, we brought a report forward. It was a report that had very little time in terms of the city's ability to submit applications for both the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund and the Canadian Wastewater Fund. We actually had to have a special meeting of City Council. At that time, we got approval from City Council to submit applications for about $17.275 million under the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund. Those projects are listed in the report, and those projects were funded 50% by the federal government and 50% by the City of Regina. At the same time, we applied for Canada Wastewater Fund, and we had $27.4 million in projects, 50% by the federal government, 25% from the city, and 25% from the province. So really, the report in front of you is a housekeeping report. The projects are approved. The projects have been started. Really, we're seeking the approval to negotiate the contribution agreement, which actually allows us to get the funding through the federal government and the province of Saskatchewan. So we're looking for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. So I have a mover for the report, please. Councillor Flagel, and seconder, Councillor Bryce. Discussion on the report. This is simply housekeeping to affect the agreement to the money's already flowing, projects are already going. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Committee reports, Executive Committee, the Economic Development Regina Annual Report. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks. If I could have a second, I'll speak to this.
Second, please. Councilor Bresciani.
So what's included in here are a number of items from an annual report, business plan, operating budget, but I will highlight the nominations to the board. I will not give you the years, but I will mention the dates. Mr. Eric Dillon, Ms. Tina Svendal, Mr. Frank Hart, Mr. Murad Al-Kadib, Dr. Vianne Timmons, Dr. David Bundridge, Ms. Carrie Lemieux, Mr. Dale Grieser, Mr. Marty Klein, Mr. Jason Drummond, Mr. Mark Lang. For consideration, please.
Thank you for that. Are there any discussions on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Special Olympics Canada Winter Games 2020. Councilor O'Donnell.
Again, if I could have a seconder, please.
Seconder, please. Okay. Councilor Young.
Thank you. I'll be specific here that the City of Regina provide a cash grant of $100,000 in support of the 2020 Special Olympics Canada Winter Games. And they must, of course, be successful in order to get that money, but they also must generate an additional $807,000. So upon a little bit of reflection here, we have bid on a number of events in the last year or so. I don't think we've missed one. So I'm going to suggest to you Winter Olympics for the special folks are coming. So this is really a good deal. And, of course, there's, I could talk a little bit about economic impact. It just doesn't seem to be quite the same with this group. This is about bringing life. This is about bringing community. This is about bringing all sorts of just wonderful people together to have a lot of joy and to bring a lot of joy to the community. I think this is one that we got to win. So ask for your support on this one.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Speakers to the report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And the support to host the 2018 MasterCard Memorial Cup. Councilor O'Donnell.
There was a global transportation hub in there.
Is there?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we do. Okay. Report 70, Global Transportation Hub Authority. Councilor O'Donnell.
So this is a municipal agreement for water, wastewater, and transportation infrastructure. If I could have a seconder, please.
Seconder, please. Councilor Bandera.
Thanks. I might just refer, if I could, to the administration just for a little bit of an overview on this, then I'll make a couple comments. So if I could just maybe ask whoever.
Ms. Harlech, please.
Through you, Your Worship. In 2006, the Government of Saskatchewan approached the City to work collaboratively to create an intermodal facility west of the City to support a relocated Canadian Pacific Intermodal Rail facility and a Loblaws warehouse. Negotiations have been ongoing since 2010 to determine the capital infrastructure contribution the GTH would pay to the City to support their development. In 2013, the Government of Saskatchewan passed Bill 81 to form the Global Transportation Hub Authority. The legislation allows the GTH to enter into agreements with the City for services, and the legislation indicated that compensation must be on a cost recovery basis. So the City and the GTH have reached a tentative agreement for the capital costs associated with providing water, wastewater, as well as access to our road network. Negotiations on operating will start at the end of this month, and the tentative agreement strikes a balance between the intent of the provincial legislation and to the City's growth pace for growth philosophy. So in summary, the tentative agreement is as follows. For water, the GTH would be buying access up to a maximum of 1 megaliter per day. Wastewater, the GTH would be buying load capacity in our plant of 600 kilograms per day of chemical oxygen demand. And for transportation, they would purchase capacity on our network up to 5,183 trips into or out of the GTH during our PM peak time. So the initial payment owing to the City based on the current build-out at the GTH would be $3.3 million, and as development occurs, payments would be made based on the capacity formulas that we've negotiated. We will typically have biannual meetings to reconcile capacity numbers and payments, and a final adjustment would take place in 2040 when we reconcile all projects and payments based on the legislation that requires the GTH to pay on a cost recovery basis. The 2040 date is used as the basis, as that's what we're projecting as the end of this current growth phase for the City. But the GTH does anticipate that their build-out would be before that date, but it will take us time to build out all of our infrastructure projects that we would need and that they need to contribute to. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Ms. Harlech. Councillor O'Donnell.
So just a little bit of reassurance. One, there's cash on hand for what's already there, but there's a plan as they grow and they need more capacity, whether it's water, wastewater, or effect on our roads, that is built into this plan. Some assurance as well is that we already have a fire services agreement, and we also have an agreement so that we can help them with their taxation and assessment of the property that's there. So we see this as being beneficial. It took a long time to get here. It was a good deal.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers to the report? I would just add to thank Ms. Harlech and her staff for a long negotiation. There is no template for this. This is a unique circumstance within the city. And the principles of growth pay for growth, but also the payment for using our facilities, if I can use that term, water, wastewater, and transportation, I think is fair and reasonable. So hats off to the administration for a job well done. I'll call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Next report is, let me just see where we're at here, 71, on the MasterCard Memorial Cup. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. So this is support to host the 2018 Master Cup Memorial Cup. If I could have a seconder.
Councillor Flagel.
Thank you very much. So you know we as a community have already won the bid, so it's coming. It'll be here in May of next year. The money is $250,000, consisting of cash grant of $200,000 and $50,000 in support of community's bid. And part of that $200,000 is broken down further so that there'll be increased seating in the current Brandt Center, I guess also renamed Brandt Center. So that will be where some of that money goes. There will be a number of opportunities for the community to get involved in terms of Fan Fest. This is part and parcel of where it goes. These are all young athletes under the age of 20, and so young people really like to get into seeing what's going on. There'll be a chance to meet some of these players and engage with them, as well as award banquets and so on, that are often part of a whole week benefit to the community. And in this case, there is a significant impact economically on our community. And seek your support, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Are there questions or comments on the report? Councillor Stevens.
If I could just get some clarification on how this money is invested. We're seeing some of this $250,000 invested into the Brandt Center. So will this have a legacy effect beyond just the Memorial Cup?
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, so just for clarification, at Exec Committee, there was a change on the $200,000. The $200,000 is not broken into $100,000 in capital. It's $200,000 in cash grant for hosting or putting on the event, so it's to pay for the operational part. $50,000 is in-kind service provided by the city, and there will be a report coming forward July 5th at Exec Committee on the capital ask for hosting the Memorial Cup.
Okay. And if you could walk me through what the city gets in return. And I know in the report there's an anticipated $11 million windfall for the city, but I'm curious, how does that come back to the public treasury directly?
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, so that doesn't come back in cash to the city. The economic spin-offs would include so hotels, restaurants. There's also with Memorial Cup for the week, it provides sport and culture opportunities for youth to attend an event like this. Would not normally come. It was a number of years ago that the City of Regina hosted this event, and these events don't come forward that often. So there's that aspect of it. I'll maybe ask Mr. May to add his comments.
Mr. May.
Through you, Your Worship, as Mr. Onright said, the City of Regina, the corporation, does not see direct return from this investment. This is an investment in the economy of the city and the vibrancy of the city. But with $100,000 does not come back to us. That money is generated in the local business.
Is there any indication of how much the private sector, specifically Brant, which kind of has its name on the space in which this is going to be housed, how much are they investing into bringing the Memorial Cup here? Or is this just the city committing to it?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, in the report coming forward July 5th, that will show the funding, the contribution through the Memorial Cup Committee, REAL, and the City of Regina.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. So we hear that there's going to be another ask July 5th. So I have concerns about this moving forward without knowing what that's going to be. So I just ask administration, why should we do this tonight rather than wait until we get the whole ask? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, this ask is on the operating budget for the Memorial Cup. The ask coming forward is the capital investment. So this will be money that will go into the Brant Centre, not only for Memorial Cup, but for future years for a number of community groups that will be able to use the Brant Centre going forward and have used it up to now. The Brant Centre, the capital money on the Brant Centre, you have a building that is 40 years old, and some of this work is definitely needed work, and there are would be three partners in contributing to that capital.
What if we say yes to this tonight and something comes forward on the 5th and we're like, no, we don't have the money for that? How does that change things for this event?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, as indicated earlier by Councillor O'Donnell, the event is coming to Regina. The operating ask is a little bit different than the capital ask, and that is definitely to council to either deny or accept the recommendations in the report coming forward. So it agreeing to or approving the recommendation tonight on the $200,000 and the $50,000 in kind. If the report coming forward July 5th, if the recommendation from council was not to accept or not to provide funding for the capital, then there would have to be a meeting with the Memorial Cup Committee and EVRAS to see how to deal with capital requirements for the Memorial Cup.
Thank you for that. So would there be any big deal if we referred this back to the 5th and had them all together? Would that delay anything? Through your worship?
Mr. Holden.
Your worship and members of City Council. A couple of points. In response to Councillor Stevens' question, the economic return to the City of Regina, we need to keep focused on the fact that we own the facilities. So the fact that money is being spent at EVRAS, that investment gets reinvested through REAL back into the facilities that ultimately we own. So in response to your question, if we were to refer this or table this until the July 31st council meeting, that would allow you to have a conversation on July 5th about the capital program that is going to come forward, the request that will come forward, and then depending on the direction of exec committee at council on July 31st, a decision could be made on both this $250,000 and the capital request. So it won't jeopardize anything at this point, but it'll give council the opportunity, I think, to consider it in its entirety.
Thank you. So I'd like to make the motion to table this until the July 31st council.
Table this to the July 5th meeting of Executive Committee?
Well, or council meeting, because it's already gone through. July 31st, is that what the date?
Okay. That's a referral motion. There's no debating on it.
Need a seconder?
I need a seconder for that. Okay. Councillor Murray, you had your hand up. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, move on to the Finance Administration Report, tax notices. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I rise to give Councillor O'Donnell a chance to catch his breath. CR 17-2, tax notices. This refers to the tax invoice that residents, taxpayers receive once a year, although this year twice a year, and it involves the form of the tax notices. The recommendation of the Finance and Administration Committee to Council, which I'd ask you to approve, is as follows. 1, the tax notices delivered to property owners beginning in 2018 be converted to a 3-page document with the provincial education taxes displayed on one page, the municipal and library taxes displayed on another page, and a summary of the total taxes and amount payable with one payment stub on the third page, that item MN 17.3 be removed from the list of outstanding items.
Can I have a second for that, please? Councilor
Thank you very much. Let me set this up a little bit. This follows on from the discussion of the budgeting challenges which we faced this year coming out of the provincial budget. At that time, concern was expressed that it'd be important that the taxpayers, the property taxpayers of the City of Regina, understand exactly what their taxes were going for, who is taxing for what. And to that end, administration was asked to produce a report, which they did. And in that report, they outlined 4 options, and you'll see them set out in at page 3 of your report. The first option is option 1, the status quo. And if you think back to the kind of tax bill that we've received since 2009, that's the option, the 1-page, 3 squares, different colors, showing the property tax from the city, the education property tax, and the library tax. This year, additionally, with the second budget consideration, there was also a pamphlet included in it. That's option 1, the status quo. Option 2, which is the option that the administration recommended to the Finance and Administration Committee, is the status quo together with an information brochure inserted into it. The third option, which is the option the Finance and Administration Committee ultimately accepted, was to convert the tax notice into the 3-page tax document, which I described just a moment earlier when I introduced the motion. And the fourth option is to convert to the 3-page document, but to send out tax notices in separate envelopes, so that you would receive a separate envelope with the municipal property tax bill in it, and a separate envelope with the education tax in it. Options 1 and 4 were taken off the table relatively quickly. Option 1, because it failed to draw the attention of the taxpayers, the kind of explanation which it was felt was needed as to who is taxing for what. Option 4, because of the expense of sending out several separate envelopes requiring several separate mailings. That left option 2, the administration's recommendation. The administration, and they may wish to speak to this for themselves, but let me try to summarize it. The administration gave 3 reasons for recommending option 2. And they're set out at page 6, really, in a very convenient chart of the recommendation. They said, first of all, option 2 was a cost-effective method. They said that in terms of option 3, option 2 would represent $81,000. Option 3 would represent $164,000 in expense. When Finance and Administration considered this, it looked at this and it said, well, we're not sure that that expense is as elevated as the chart or the administration would indicate. They said, first of all, postage would be the same. Secondly, there was said that it would require design and focus groups to develop the separate page inserts into the envelope. That was pointed out that perhaps a focus group was not necessary, that the design was not that complex, and it was a one-time thing, and also with respect to the IT, that it was a one-time charge, so that the real cost was the extra cost in printing. So the committee felt that the extra cost would not be that elevated, given the advantage to the taxpayer of understanding exactly what the situation was in terms of where they were paying taxes. The other 2 points the administration made was they were concerned that these would have to be, that the printing would have to be outsourced, which would require, I'd ask for a little bit of indulgence. It's a complicated report.
Make it quick because you're well over 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll conclude there.
Okay. You can close debate, though, if you'd like. Sure. Councillor Flegel?
Thank you. Well overdue. I'm not a Facebook subscriber, but I'm on there. And last night, for whatever reason, I get notifications on my phone, which I'm trying to turn off, but I don't know how to do it. But anyway, it said on there, why don't you heckle your councillor? And it said my name underneath. So I thought, okay, I'll go to my desktop on my computer. And there was a gentleman that wrote an article or a note that posted, and he goes, to your point, yeah, the city's charging me 20% taxes. My house value went up $110,000, and the city's not doing anything about it. That was what we got. Because they read the bill, and it said, and he figured it all out. So anyway, I don't normally respond. I'm very seldom ever on Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, but I made a response. And I asked him to check his bill to go through exactly what we talk about all the time. And one of the other responses was that, why don't you move to White City? So we need to figure this out. We need to get this right, because we are all tired of defending that is not just the city taxes that are on this bill. And they're blaming us for the $110,000 re-evaluation and reassessment. The one guy did, though, say he does. I did notice that the provincial government is charging us 80% assessment instead of 70, but didn't say a value on it. But still, at the end of the day, the onus comes back into this chamber that we're charging, in this particular case, 20%, which is untrue, because then I responded, which I don't normally do either, to the 3.99 we did and the 2.5% download. It's not our fault that the reassessment changed, and it was not our fault that the 70% went to 80. So hopefully something like what we're bringing forward tonight is going to change that, because I really don't want to be doing Facebook. And I got this from I'll call him a sick friend of mine, which is I'll call him one of these, because that's what he likes to do. He likes to dig and poke. So that's one of his things that he likes to do, and he thinks it's hilarious that he can now get his councillor heckled. But actually, he's not even in my ward. I think he's in Councillor Young's ward. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flegel, for that. Councillor Massanelli.
Being on the Finance Admin Committee, I noticed that there was a little bit of, as Councillor Hawkins pointed out, doubt in administration's assessment of how much Option 3 would actually cost. I can't base my decision on that doubt because I took administration at the face value. I think the actual costs they represent in Option 3 are true. And in light of all the cuts we made in our last budget for many different things, from condo rebates on their garbage collection to putting the lawn bowlers under the gun and almost pulling them back for $60,000, I think the extra costs to go to Option 3 do nothing but service us as councillors to help explain ourselves better, but I'm not willing to pass that cost along to my residents to do my job. I find Option 2 to be a little bit more palatable to myself. It's not a big increase, and I think it serves the same purpose. And if it wasn't for all the cuts we proposed and followed through with last time, I might go after Option 3, but we cut programs for less than that already, so that's my feeling. I don't know how to make an amendment or if this can be moved to Option 2.
Well, you certainly are able to, there's a couple ways to proceed. One of them would be to add an amendment. The other one would see how this goes. If this passes, then answer the question. If it's defeated, then there'd be an option to look at Option 2 as an example.
Okay.
So
Can I make the amendment to look at Option 2 first and see if it passes or fails?
Yes, I think you could do that, yes.
I think I'd like to do that then.
Are you making an amendment?
If I could, I'd rather make an amendment to vote to pass Option 2.
1 second. It actually would be a contrary motion, not an amendment, so you have to wait for this to be defeated and then put yours through.
I think I got my point across and said my piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brashani.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question. Where are we right now with the electronic, like the sending them out electronically? Does anyone know where we are with that? Because I know I did have a call from the resident, and asked, they want to do it, but I don't know if it's there yet. Are we there yet, or?
Ms. Howard?
Through your worship, I'll ask Ms. Bryden to respond, but I'll start. We are doing e-services, and we're looking at how we can keep improving our services, and perhaps Ms. Bryden can give an update on where we are with e-service.
Ms. Bryden?
Through your worship. Recently, we opened up e-property, which is for property owners to access information on their accounts. E-billing has not yet been released, but it is a phase that we are working to implement, hopefully by the end of the year.
Okay, so it'll be ready for the next tax year then? Is that accurate?
Ms. Bryden?
Through your worship, yes, there is some technical work that we need to figure out, and then we're hoping we'll be able to implement for next tax year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Barsani. Councilor O'Donnell, do you have your hand up? What? Yes.
Thanks very much. So I want to speak in favor of what is before you, and appreciate the fact that it is before you. So I want to be really clear. I'm not in the education business. If I wanted to do that, I would have run for the public school board or the separate school board. Didn't do that. I'm in municipal politics. If you recall, when there was schools placed before us, there was, without discussion, the notion of municipal reserves. And by the way, that was without discussion, and that is now part and parcel of what's going to go on in the future. When the past bill went out, we had to state on the bill, because it was accurate at the time, that in 2017, the dollars would go to the school boards, because that's, in fact, where they went. The fact, though, in terms of the increase, is that not all of those monies could be kept by the school boards. That was not accurate. Okay? So what happens next year is that all monies collected in terms of the education portion goes to the provincial government. And you will note, and only now am I finding out that it actually is in the public a little bit, that, in fact, reductions have occurred in terms of going to education, but more money is going to the provincial government. So we need to make sure that people understand clearly what's going on and where our role and job is. I did speak to one of the school boards a little while ago, and they informed me that they were getting calls asking, why are you as a board raising property taxes? And they had to send out a letter. Now imagine now how much information is going back and forth. We didn't do that. And to Jerry's point, and what we've said from the get-go is people go right down to the bottom, read the bottom number, and at the top it says City of Regina. So one, this to me is a step in the right direction. Let us, in fact, inform people, and let us be part of the democratic process so that they know how to handle what is before them. Two, it will get clearer because now the boards of education and the Catholic School Board are no longer part of this. And so that will help. This will help the process. This is exactly what I hope for when I put the motion on the floor. I ask you, please, please, put this.
Councilor Murray.
Thank you, through your worship. I'd like to speak in concurrence with Councillor O'Donnell on that as well. And although I appreciate Councillor Mancinelli talking about the cost savings, I think the bigger piece here is to explain, if the provincial government isn't going to explain how the budget created affects the city the way it does, it's up to us to explain that to people so they know. So that's my thoughts. Thanks.
Councillor Findura.
Thank you, Worship. The Finance Committee, we talked about that it's just about doubles from 2 to 3. But the question to you, Your Worship, to administration is, some of these numbers here, like the IT or the design, all that, is that just a one-time fee? And the $164,000 will not be year after that. So the prices will change.
Ms. Howard?
Through your worship, that is correct. The the design and the IT, which accounts for $60,000 or estimated $60,000, would be a one-time cost.
So then that might not even be, to your worship, exact. Once dust clears, that might not be exact cost now. But then following years, that will change. Correct? Your Worship?
She just said that, yes.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
right.
So, what I'm asking is that the question was about the IT and the design and the focus. Just want to make sure that we understanding the fact is that once we design something, it will be ours. So it's not going to cost us to redesign something again if we change for some reason.
I think Ms. Howard answered that. She said that was correct.
Okay.
That's
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Other questions on the report? I have one just related to those numbers, and I'll refer to Councillor Hawkins, who introduced the report. I might have perhaps misunderstood this. This number is high. There is actually not. It won't be that high. Is that correct? That there's actually, before you answer, that these numbers are guesstimates or in a range. That the actual number for option 3 is not that high. So firstly, I'm going to ask Councillor Hawkins if that was his point, one of the points he made, and then I'll ask the administration to comment on that. Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. That is correct. The point was that two of the numbers, the design and focus group and the IT number, were one-time only costs, and then with respect to design and focus, the committee wondered whether we really did need another number, another focus group, and whether design would be that expensive. So yes, there was a concern that the numbers here reflected high numbers.
Ms. Harlack, that was likely what your staff heard at the Finance Administration Commission. Do you have a comment on this as well?
Through your worship, we stand by our estimates. They may be less, but at this point, we feel just based on the work, Councillor Hawkins is correct. If we don't do a focus group, that would save some money, but because of the impact that we want to have, we would recommend doing that so that when we go through the whole process of redesigning and doing this, that we're testing it before we send it out to the larger populace to make sure that it's understandable. But that is definitely something that we could consider reducing the cost for the one time.
Okay. Councillor Masson, I know you had your hand raised to speak, but you can only speak once on the report. Only if there's an amendment would you speak. Okay. A second time. Other speakers on the report? Councillor Stevens?
I guess, I don't know, I'm kind of struck with this one. I appreciate what Mike was mentioning here about the value of option 3, but I do agree with Councillor Mancinelli that we're looking at a $20,000 difference, and I understand this might be a one-time cost, but that's a huge cost at a time when we're trimming back services. And I see the ongoing value here, but I think for me it's very difficult to vote for option 3. I think option 2 seems to be a bit more prudent and maintains that print copy. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. I think we spend money year after year with education around the tax notices, and I think having option 3 put forward will help alleviate some of that education because it's already explained, and it actually has a sheet in it that explains it as well. So I think ultimately it may be a little bit more money to start with, and you guys know how I like to hang on to that money and not spend it very often. But I think this is a good use of tax dollar to explain where the taxes are going. It will ultimately save money in my mind in the long run because you're not having to put that money in education every single year that will already be in the tax notice. So that's my rationale.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Other speakers? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. When we spoke at Finance and Admin about this, we also raised the issue of option 2, having some redesign done on that tax notice, because some of the titles on the side of the page are so small that your eye doesn't go to it. So we had talked about ways that we could improve the piece of paper that went out this year so that it brought to the fore education taxes, which it does, but it doesn't really lay out the other two as well as it could. So that was just part of the discussion we had, that you could improve the sheet we have now in option 2. But the administration raised 2 other issues that I'd like them to speak to. One is privacy, and the other is out of house. And so could we ask them to talk to us a little bit about privacy issues as they were raised, and also this can't be printed in-house. It has to go out of house.
Ms. Harlech?
Through your worship. So with respect to the privacy, it was more about sending out our files of our tax rolls outside of the corporation. We have done it in the past, and there is secure things, but it was one of the risks. I think for the bigger thing is that when we send it out to now, because right now we can do it in-house. Once we go to this, we can't. Is more that the fact that in order to hit the June 30th deadline, we have to have them mailed out 30 days in advance, which means we would need all the mill rates and everything set by middle of April so that we could hit those. So it was more about a risk about not having that flexibility, because once we have to outsource it, and just that there's more risk when you outsource if they don't meet the deadlines and those sorts of things, that we just raise our risk on not hitting those deadlines for mail-outs and those sorts of things. But we'll mitigate that through our contracts with, as best as we can, through any contracting, whoever we contract to. But those were the concerns that administration had.
Thank you for that. Other speakers? Councillor Hawkins, do you want to close debate?
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you very much. I appreciate the comments of the administration just now. They've dealt with the other two issues. There was a concern about the risk of privacy, but that concern can be dealt with. Other levels of government sometimes have to allocate to the private sector the production of this kind of document, and contracts can be secured and privacy respected. I also, with respect to the time allowed, appreciate the answer that should Council decide to go in this direction, the administration feels that they'll adjust to meet that need accordingly. So I think that the debate focuses on the issue which was crystallized up nicely. Does Council feel, on the one hand, that the cost factor overwhelms the desirability of better educating the public on what exactly their taxes are and where they're going, or vice versa? Finance Administration Committee and some speakers tonight thought that it was very important for the public to understand exactly who is taxing for what. And under the current arrangement, it's very confusing. Most people don't understand the distinction between, as Councillor O'Donnell said, money is collected by the municipality for municipal undertakings, and money is collected for school undertakings. Now, under the new arrangements, which will in fact go into the province's general operating funds, so that the Finance and Administration Committee felt that the cost of helping the taxpayer understand where his or her tax money was going and for what purpose was worth the relatively small cost over the long run of a clearer tax arrangement. And it just reminds me of the importance in the democracy of taxation and representation. It's at the heart of our democracy that the public understand exactly who's collecting what taxes and for what reason. So I'd ask Council support for the Finance Administration recommendation, which is before it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. You've closed debate, so there's no further debate. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Before we go on to Public Works and Infrastructure, just want to remind members there's been a couple of occasions where we've addressed each other by our first name, and you really should remain as a councillor and whomever, just keep your quorum going, if you don't mind. Public Works and Infrastructure Committee, first report of 2 is request for proposal for engineering design for the Creeks wastewater.
Thank you. I rise to bring forward
Councilor
CR
Weiss.
17-73, which is the RFP for engineering services for detailed design and construction of Creeks wastewater pumping station expansion.
A seconder for that, please. Councillor Young.
So I move both that City Council approve the issuance of the RFP to initiate the engagement of professional engineering services for the design and construction supervision of the Creeks wastewater pumping station and expansion. And point number 2, that City Council delegate the authority to the Executive Director, Planning and Development, to award the RFP, provided the fee for engineering services is less than the project budget, including contingency. So just to give you a little bit of background on this, so the existing Creeks wastewater pumping station needs to be expanded to provide services to the remaining phases of the developments of the Creeks on Gardner, the Greens on Gardner, the Creeks, and the town's neighborhoods. So the current pumping capacity requires expansion. This will be achieved by the installation of a second forced main and completing upgrades to the existing lifting station. And that's what this is for.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Are there any comments on this? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just think it's really important to understand that servicing agreement fees reserve pays for this, and that it's, so could I ask the administration who and how do those fees get put into that reserve?
Ms. Howard.
Through your worship, so as development takes place and land is subdivided, we charge our hectarage fee, which currently sits at $394,000 per hectare for lands that were in the 235, and up to $414,000 per hectare for 300,000 K lands. And so all that money goes into a reserve, which pays as per our policy for different infrastructure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Flegel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You talked about the creeks, the towns. Does this pumping station, or does this go right up to Victoria Avenue? Will it accommodate everything that's going to be coming into Victoria Avenue and south, or is there going to be another phase somewhere else?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, there will be a requirement for another pumping station within the whole area for the east.
Okay, I'm not sure if maybe Councillor Bresciani last, but I'm going to bring it up about there was always talk about water. This is wastewater, but what about water for this area? Is there going to be something inside this plan, or is that a separate entity altogether? And again, does it cover from Victoria Avenue South?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, it is a separate system. Right now, we are addressing through the Water Master Plan pressure issues that are taking place in the east. And as I indicated, the Water Master Plan will look at what mechanisms we need to put in place to improve the pressure in the east.
Okay. The other thing is Pacer Park. Does this come into play for this particular zone with drainage into this particular pumping station?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, no, not at this point. It'll go into the larger system that will do the remainder of the lands.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flegel. Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just a couple questions on this. So can I ask why would this ever qualify for any federal funding as well through the wastewater?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, you'd have to look at the specific programs. I'd have to look at the grants, but because it's growth related, we use servicing agreement fees because we always want to preserve our grant funding opportunities for projects that don't qualify to be paid for through fees such as servicing agreement fees.
Perfect. Okay, and thank you. Just one more question. So this is for the population that's for future growth. That's where we're hoping this is going to be looking after that, the 21,000. It's going to be upgraded for that. Now, I just have a question because there's also going to be future growth with the Chuka Business Center out there that's happening. Is that going to encompass all that as well?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, maybe I'll ask Ms. Folk to explain the servicing arrangement for the remainder of the area and the requirements for the pumping station for the whole area.
Ms. Folk?
Through you, Your Worship, what's in front of you today is for the upgrades to the pump station. We're at the point with growth where that is triggering the requirements to increase capacity. What's planned or in the catchment area for this particular project is the full build out of the creeks, Greens on Gardner, as well as the towns in Eastbrook. In terms of growth beyond that, we're still operating within the context of the Southeast Neighborhood Plan, and we're in negotiations and discussions with developers for subdivisions outside of those four subdivisions to ensure that servicing is in alignment with the Neighborhood Plan.
Okay, so Your Worship, just one more question. So just to be clear, so are we're saying there may have to be another pumping station? Is that accurate?
Through Your Worship, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Murray.
Through your worship, this is a question just to the upgrades that we may have to do given densification in the city. Are there other areas that we have to look at currently where we're not meeting service levels, or there's a potential given increased densification, say in the downtown?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, as we look at infill and new areas coming online with existing infrastructure, we do an analysis of what types of infrastructure upgrades would be required, or new infrastructure like a new pumping station elsewhere. We do a number of engineering studies to determine future upgrades in order to meet our 300,000 population. And through the wastewater master plan and the water master plan, we'll have a better idea of what infrastructure requirement upgrades we will need.
Okay. And through your worship, since we can't utilize servicing agreements in that situation, how do we generally fund if we moving forward?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, when it's not growth triggered, then it's funded through either taxes or through grants that we get through different programs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Other discussions on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Lead service connection management.
Thank you. I bring forward CR 17-74, which is the lead services connection
Seconder for that, please.
program.
Councilor Massanelli.
Thank you. The recommendations brought from Public Works are that the city approve the additional elements to the lead service connection management program. These elements are a water filtration system, or water filter system, that provides eligible residents and property owners with either a lead removal filter that is certified to remove lead with sufficient replacement inserts to last 12 months, or a rebate of up to $100 per location for purchase of a filter certified to remove lead. And Part B, that free annual water testing, in-home point of use testing for eligible homeowners and property owners, and that this report that administration be directed to provide a report to City Council prior to April 30th, 2018, outlining enhancements of the lead service connection management program. So this comes about, a little bit of history, that the water that comes from from Buffalo Pound Water Treatment System, I'm just trying to say it all in once. I'll slow down a bit. The water received from the Buffalo Pound Water Treatment Plant and the City of Regina's water mains are lead-free, meeting the city's regulatory obligations. As with all water provided by any municipality, if water touches materials containing lead, lead can enter the water. Lead materials can be found in approximately 5% of the city-owned service connections in Regina, which connect to water mains to individual buildings, and the plumbing inside some buildings as well. Several factors determine whether traces of lead are present in tap water, including water chemistry, condition of the lead services connection, whether lead-containing materials are present in the building's plumbing. The city is responsible for a city-owned portion of the service connection from the water main to the property line. The property owner is responsible for the privately owned portion of the service connection from the property line into the home, as well as in-house plumbing. So this is a way to, as we get through, and maybe I'll ask the question, so how long will it take us to get rid of all of the city-owned water mains that have lead in them? The 5%.
Yeah, so ask the administration to provide that and background information on the report itself. Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, we do a number of connections each year as we have construction projects in the year. I'll ask Ms. Wilson to just comment on what the current plans are. Under this current review, however, we are looking at the current state of our lead connections throughout the city, and we'll be reviewing whether our current program needs to be adjusted or amended to meet the needs. But I'll ask Ms. Wilson to talk about the current program.
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship. At present, we're replacing about 100 connections per year, and at that rate, it would be about 2070 before we would be finished. Current best practice is suggesting that a target date of 2050 is an appropriate time frame. That means that we would need to increase the number that we're replacing, and that is one of the things that we are working on through alignment with our capital program and through identifying locations that we can change out more quickly.
Thank you for that. just so that I can go back and explain a few things to people listening, and as well as my council colleagues, can I have somebody explain to me, how does the rebate or the free water filter work? How does somebody go about getting this?
Ms. Wilson.
Through you, Your Worship, I'll start, and I will ask Chris Seeley, our manager responsible for the program, to continue. The intention is for us to make this as simple as possible for people. One of the challenges for many people can be determining what is the appropriate filter. It's one of the reasons that we're making the choice to have filters available that we can provide to individuals, as well as offering the opportunity for people to get a rebate if they prefer to select their own filter. So we would be making use of, I believe, Service Regina, for people to make the phone call in to speak to us, to contact us, and then we would be evaluating to determine that they meet the qualifications, which would mean that they live in an area that has lead, or that we can validate that the city's connection is lead. And at that point in time, we would be making the appropriate arrangements to provide the filter.
Thank you. If somebody wanted their water tested, how would they go about that?
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship, I'm going to ask Mr. Seeley to provide a little bit more detail.
Mr. Seeley?
Through you, Your Worship, there's 2 testing programs that are available. There is one testing program that we've entitled the Random Testing Study, and that one will be seeking volunteers, and that's what some councillors may have experienced, as a number of samples taken over some time. The other program is the in-home point-of-use testing program, where, again, they can contact through Service Regina. Service Regina will have a list of eligible residents' addresses. If they are eligible, then they'll be passed through to the Waterworks Department, where we'll put together the required requisitions and sampling procedures and other information, and we'll provide that to them, at which time they can then go and get a bottle from the lab, do their test, submit it. We will get the invoice and the result, and they will get the result.
Thank you for a lot of information. So I encourage my council colleagues to vote with us with this, to, as we work through as a city, getting rid of all of our lead connections, and hopefully the residents out in Regina who do have lead in their own connections do make the appropriate steps to get rid of that as well, to keep our residents safe.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Speakers to the report? Councillor Stevens?
In the report, when free testing is mentioned, it's a focus here on homeowners and property owners. If I was a renter in a unit and I called and I wanted the city to conduct testing, would you come out and do so?
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship, absolutely. We're concerned about getting information about locations that may have lead, and it's the individual who lives in the home and uses the water who is the one who needs the information. So absolutely, that they would be eligible.
Okay, thank you. Is there currently a map that administration is willing to make public? Residents have already asked me since the media coverage, do I live in one of these areas? Is this going to be a concern? What kind of information are we going to start seeing trickle out to the public from the city after we make a decision here?
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship, I'll begin, and perhaps Mr. Seeley can add in some information. So the information will be available at Service Regina when customers call about the city's side of the line. One thing to bear in mind is we can only ever speak about the city side. We don't know what people may have on their own side. I believe that there will be some map information available, and I'll ask Mr. Seeley to speak to that.
Mr. Seeley?
Through you, Your Worship, we're working with IT to put the information for individual residences on their account on regina.ca, so they can find out what the city-owned portion is. We're also working with IT to develop a tool where they can help them determine what's on the private side, so they can go through the website and it'll walk them through the steps. In addition, there'll be as part of that tool, based on the effective age of the house, it'll give them an indication about whether or not lead on the private side would be a concern. So we're trying to get all that information bundled up and put up on the website to help people walk through the process.
Thank you. It's mentioned here, we're talking about a pretty far horizon. We're hoping for a 2050 time frame here. and I did. I had it tested. The staff were wonderful. I'm very much going to recommend the process and make sure that people are calling. Very easy, professional, is wonderful. If I have my pipes tested, the water's tested, I find out there's trace elements of lead in that water, do certain homes who have had the testing appear higher up on that replacement list?
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship, at the moment, our intention is not that having the testing puts you up on the list, but if individuals who are identified as having lead are interested in replacing their side of the line, we will be looking at prioritizing replacing the city side of the line as close as we can in time, as that is best practice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Other questions of the report? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Information reports, one on the Executive Committee Buffalo Pond Water Treatment Plant annual report, and the next is the Planning Commission Civic Naming Committee. So a motion to move both, perhaps? Councillor O'Donnell. Seconder? Okay. Councillor Bryce, discussion on either one of those reports? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We do have a motion on Access Without Fear that's been published, so we'll move on to adjournment motion. Councillor Bryce, seconder. Councillor Barshani, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great evening.
Oh, well, it's been a few places.
All of them may not be
the
good.
last couple of hours, it's been to a couple of places.
And they all may not be good places.